So it's my great pleasure today to have Andreas Kluth, author of Hannibal and Me, the West Coast correspondent of The Economist. Thanks a lot, Andreas, to be interviewed by me.
Thanks, Kenton. Thanks for having me.
So as I love your book so much that I didn't want to wait for Amazon to ship me the book, and I ordered a Kindle version and start reading it right away. So what a great job! It's such a page turner. So let me start by asking you this. So can you briefly set up what the book is about and what leads you to want to write the book?
Well, the book is about success and failure in our lives, in Kempton's life, in Andreas's life, in whoever the reader is. It's a story of other people from history, and the idea is in part that you read an adventure tale, that it's fun. You learn about history without any heavy lifting, but the explicit premise is that you find out about yourself a little bit, about the ups and downs in your life, about success and failure, triumph and disaster. And you asked me the inspiration. It was really a beautiful line from a Rudyard Kipling poem, which is meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same. And I read it so long ago, but it always stuck with me. The entire poem is beautiful, but that line called triumph and disaster impostors. And I sort of found that to be true throughout history and in all sorts of stories. If you look around our politics, our business, our private lives today, and so I thought, well, let's look at some people whose lives are especially interesting, and tell those lives in such a way that we're just having great fun as we're reading them, but at the same time we go, oh my God, that's me. That sort of happened to me, or well, not that, but no, this. The way he responded to disaster in that situation, that could be something for me now because I'm unemployed, or I lost my house to foreclosure, or I got divorced. You know what I mean? So the characters and the main characters are from ancient history, from the war between Carthage and Rome. But there's more modern characters, including Tiger Woods, So they're mixed together in such a way that there's a story that lets us understand life, basically. It's not been easy for me either, if I might just say. Here, I'll hold it up here. But you know what? The author in the modern American publishing industry doesn't really get to choose his title. He gets to suggest a title. So
I see.
It's not entirely my wording, shall we say. The book is mine, but other people had their input, shall we just say. Okay. I struggle saying it. I'll try to do you the favor. It's right. Hannibal and Me, what history's greatest military strategists can teach us about success and failure. It's a mouthful. The best thing I can say about it is the book gets better as soon as you're past the subtitle.
Right. But when I go into the bookstore and when I'm asking for the book or talking to people, the first thing they think of is Hannibal Lecter, Silence of the Lamb. It's like, did you get that a lot?
Oh, yes. I mean, I knew that would be a problem right when I pitched it. But you see, going back to one of the objectives is to make people like you love ancient history and realize how beautiful it is. So I wasn't happy having most of America think Hannibal refers to Hannibal Lecter. I had to do my part. Others are doing their part to remind you who Hannibal was, right? Hannibal Lecter. So I know it drives me crazy when everyone. Well, you make me very happy by saying that, because that's sort of one of the, the main purposes, as I just said, to get lessons from the past, from the stories of our lives, for our lives. But hearing you say that you enjoyed ancient history makes me very happy, because I think the problem a lot of us had with history in school is that it's just taught in a boring way, sometimes by boring people, and it's just fascinating. And the main thing about the past, it's not past. They're really, in some ways, they're very different, but they're also very much like us. So I always loved history, and so part of one of the other reasons is to make it fun for other people. So as I said, no heavy lifting. It's hopefully you get to know a lot about ancient history just by reading, without trying. You're not even aware you're doing work. You don't feel like you're you're doing your homework. It's just fun. It should be parts of it should be as fun as Harry Potter, except it happens to be true, actual history.
Yeah, yeah.
And Roman history and that war between Carthage and Rome is so much fun. Everyone should know about it. It's just part of our heritage. So your dad was under the impression that Truman was defeated and humiliated in Korea?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that makes Truman even greater, because Truman is in the book, in the chapter, in many chapters, as you know. He's of interest to me because, in contrast to people like Hannibal, he succeeded late in life, very late, in his 60s. And nobody thought, so a lot of us, it's a life trajectory. Some of us need to mature before we're ready for success. And he's an example of that. But then he's a great example of thinking strategically as opposed to tactically, and that's what you're referring to now. In the Korean War, if I should, maybe I just quick refreshers. Soon after the Second World War, the Korean War broke out, and that was in the context of the Cold War. Truman sent a general named Douglas MacArthur to fight. It was actually officially they were UN, United Nations forces, but they were American forces, basically. And under the command of Douglas MacArthur, who was this prima donna, this swashbuckling hero. And he becomes a sort of an archetype of the tactical approach. He wanted to win this war. And he first rolled back the North Koreans, but then they fought back, and then the Chinese attacked. And Truman, who was, of course, the commander-in-chief, the elected civilian in charge of strategy, understood that there's something very dangerous happening, and that he was at risk of confusing tactics with strategy. The tactics are defined as you win battles, you win the war. That was Douglas MacArthur. He wanted literally to nuke the North Koreans and the Chinese. He wanted to start throwing nuclear bombs. And MacArthur and Truman, the strategist, realized no, because we've already drawn the Chinese in, we might draw the Soviets in, we might have World War III. We could maybe win this war in Korea, but the price would be World War III, nuclear bombs on both sides, no one left to march in the victory parade because the planet is radioactive. That cannot be the definition of success. That's the definition of disaster. And then took his grand vision and his strategic thinking to realize that. So eventually, MacArthur, the general, and Truman, the commander-in-chief, became enemies. And Truman fired MacArthur, which was difficult because MacArthur was popular and Truman was unpopular at first, because Americans don't like to lose. But Truman, now we realize that he was redefining success. And this is the key point. Again, remember, we're drawing lessons for us, is you cannot be the one to win the battles and lose the war. You cannot even sometimes be the one to win the war at all costs, but lose the peace. And Truman said, we need to win the peace. And what did he do? So in terms of, your dad remembers him being defeated and humiliated. I remember him taking the high road and preserving the planet and a very stable peace throughout the Cold War, which we then eventually won, the Cold War. And, and so he made the right decision. And I think he's a great leader for that. And I think for our own lives, we have a lot to learn from him. In that way, because he thought, well, what is the world like after the war? Do I want that world? Well, that's what we're trying to get to.
Yeah, it was bone-chilling, the line in the book. I read MacArthur at one time want to deploy 40 to 50 nuclear weapons between China and Korea and create a nuclear wasteland. It's like, holy cow.
Yeah. Oh my God. And he went nuts. I mean, he was a bit of an extreme example, but I think this happens to a lot of us when we have a election going on, a lot of fights in the Republican primaries, and just look around you, or in your office politics or wherever. Sometimes people get so wound up with winning a particular fight they're in that they make it so much worse for themselves that they forget why they picked this fight in the first place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's say you and your girlfriend, your wife, or your partner, you know, we have a fight. Well, maybe I'll do a rhetorical victory. Maybe I can say, well, I told you so, or this, but you damage the relationship. That would be an example, right? That would be
Right.
like, you know, the example of the I don't want to say Cold War, but Truman taught us to say, no, look, in this case, preserve the relationship. It's not important who gave whom the car keys. Let that one go.
Right,
Do you know
right.
what I mean? I was at the London School of Economics in the 90s, and I was doing my master's thesis, and I was getting to more and more obscure layers in research. So, like, first you read the obvious books, then the less obvious, and finally I was reading this book, and it cracked because it had never been checked out, and it turned out to be the PhD thesis of my father, written, you know, in the 60s. And it was funny because I used that because, you know, for young people, I was young at the time. Hannibal was young when he crossed the Alps and attacked the Romans. Pablo Picasso was young when he painted his most famous painting. You know, for a lot of young people, we sort of we follow, we react, we respond to our parents at the beginning of life because, you know, what else would we respond to? So we respond to them, either we try to emulate them or we rebel against them, or if they ignored us, if they're absent, we search for them because we, you know, like, let's say if we don't know who our parents are. And so I look through examples like that, and sometimes we mix them all up together. That was the case with me, and I realized that when I was there in that library, and I came across this PhD thesis never checked out. Only I found it because, you know, I was on one hand rebelling against my dad, and on the other hand, I was searching for my identity by trying to figure out who he was, and I was probably also still emulating him. So we had a difficult relationship in those years, but you can't escape your parents. That's the point of that anecdote for me, and it was moving for me, and I'm glad it worked for you in the book.
You did.
I think the influence of
Very
parents then becomes less, obviously, later in life when we become our own person, and that's described in the book. But in your 20s, you know, this book is about success and failure. When we start, we probably think about we have ideas of success and failure that our parents gave us. You mentioned Amy Tan, who's in the book, a famous writer, Asian American. Well, her mother had ideas. You know, my wife is Asian American, by the way. You know, her parents had ideas about what success means, and it doesn't always work out that way. You know, you can rebel, you can do something else, but then they give us something. In the case of my parents, I think they gave me an idea that I still have about the good life, about things that matter and things that don't matter. So things that matter would be independence in your career, that you're not a slave just in some corporate organization. Things that matter would be intellectual stimulation. Things that don't matter are money, provided you have enough. Okay, so values like that might, but I don't no longer know, because I do think, and I think I tell in the stories in my book, as you get older, as you get to midlife, where I am now, you really do separate yourself and figure it out for yourself. And that's an important part of success in life, is that at some point you really become who you need to be. But I think in your 20s, I think you chase a dream that probably your parents gave you.
Yeah. I guess in closing, readers and book publishing industry have their own yardstick of success, defining how to define a book's success. What yardsticks will you use to define the success of your first book, your book writing career?
Okay, the definition of success for the book, that's a good question, very pertinent, very relevant, right, given the topic of the book. I define it as, I want the right people to respect and like it. So that was from the start. I mean, number one is I should have fun writing it, and I should be proud of it, and I should write pretty much the book I would like to write. I should not try to take a shortcut onto the bestseller list by writing a book that would succeed that I'm really ashamed of. That would be a failure. So by that yardstick, I'm happy. It's just been launched, and the reviews have been great and
Excellent. Yeah.
better than I expected. Almost, it's humbling. It's humbling. So I'm very happy, and I think I did, for the most part, write the book I was meant to write as a first book, and so I think that works. Now, whether or not it is a bestseller or not, it's selling well. I don't. It's not on the top 10 list or anything. It may get there or it may not, but that cannot be so important for me now. If anything, addendum to the definition of success would be: would it lead to a second book, and would it give me the freedom again to write exactly the book I want to write as a second book? And that remains to be seen. So check back with me later this year.